Welcome once again to One Step Beyond. It's time now to proceed with what will go into the archives as both another installment of RFA 38 and an addendum to Radio Free America 31. RFA 38 is the Terror Connection Part 3, Radio Free America 31, which was the third broadcast in a 7-part and ongoing Radio Free America series dealing with the Iran-Contra scandal, was entitled The Destabilization of the Carter Administration. Now, some weeks back, specifically on January 24th and 31st of 1993, I did two groundbreaking interviews with Fara Mansoor, a native of Iran who's been in this country for many years and is a member of the Iranian resistance fighting against the brutal Islamic fundamentalist government in Iran, and he has come across some blockbuster information indicating that, in fact, elements and dominating elements of our national security establishment have been in bed with the Islamic fundamentalists for much, much longer than the general public had been led to believe from what little has come to light in the Iran-Contra scandal. And we're going to be visiting with Fara Mansoor now, and he's going to be not only revealing some new information from his academic research, but also discussing some very disturbing, some very frightening things that have happened to him personally. So without further ado, we're going to go to the phones, and if the gods of technology are smiling on us this evening, we will be visiting with Fara Mansoor. Good evening, Fara. Can you hear me?
Yes, Dave. Good evening. How are you?
Okay. Well, I'm enduring. I can't say as I'm exactly thrilled, both by the news that I'm reading in the papers and the news that has come my way from your direction down south. You're live now with the audience here, and eventually, in addition to the audience listening this evening, other audiences in other areas will be hearing this via tape.
Well, allow me to start with this. In the protracted struggle against forces of fascism, I have uncovered a vulnerable spot in their soft underbelly.
Okay.
The so-called Islamic Revolution, the hostage crisis, and the Reagan Revolution, and especially the birth of the New World Order, comprised a massive criminal enterprise of fraud, deception, and all kinds of dirty tricks.
And by the way, I would note, too, that New World Order was a phrase that Adolf Hitler used to describe his plans for the world as well, lest people think that our discussion of fascism is somewhat arcane. Go ahead.
That New World Order is destroying our social, economic, and political liberty at an alarming rate. However, I have developed a powerful weapon that exposes the origin, the nature of that fraud. It is important not because it is my shtick or something that I have discovered or something that I have done, but because it is an historic opportunity to wield together the sword of justice against the forces of fascism,
and that's
exposing them with their own documented history. Obviously, I cannot do it alone. My voice has been heard by the oppositions and those group of people within the Islamic Revolution, the Islamic Republic of Iran and the forces of reaction within this country, and they are working overtime to silence it and discrediting me by twisting and exploiting my very difficult living condition, which is the cause of what it took me for 13 years, at least within the last 3 years, to come up with this unbelievable, believable, but, something that it's for the first time, we are witnessing what is going on.
By the way, I would, just interjecting briefly, Fara, I would reiterate for the benefit of the audience that much of the landmark research that you have done was, in fact, most of it, was aired for the light of day for the first time on this broadcast in January, that most of that blockbuster information of truly historic proportions with a capital H and P had not seen the light of day before. It's worth mentioning that again, Fara, because particularly for people that are tuned in for the first time, they may not fully appreciate why some of the experiences that you have had in the interim have befallen you.
Thank you. Allow me to say this, that within last year and a half, I tried very hard to to get through the the mainstream of the news medias and television and radios. And the later part of last year, as we got closer to the presidential election, whoever really was interested in the material, they were very afraid in putting it out. And those that they were interested to even discuss it later on were removed from their position or by very, very mysterious circumstances. We were not able to get my story out. Finally, on November 13th of last year, for the first time, I was heard on KBOO radio station in Portland, Oregon, courtesy of Marlene Smith and Lenny Zinkin, and for the first time, a brief historical background of what I have studied and what I came up with was exposed.
By the way, both of them are frequent participants on this program and are both trusted and valued colleagues. Go ahead.
And they warned me at that time, and I knew that this struggle is a very difficult struggle, and I am going to be facing many difficulties. However, the forces of opposition to my story began to work against me from actually a few months before that, and began in October by the bankers that I was doing business with. And this banker, one of the board of directors, actually had some close tie with Islamic fundamentalists in Iran, and specifically with Mr. Ibrahim Yazdi, who was a prominent figure in the hostage crisis, which we have dealt with him and his role in the past, who was between 1975 to 1978 Khomeini's representative in the United States.
And by the way, Fara, he was also, for the benefit of the members of the listening audience, he was also a key collaborator with the U.S. national security establishment in helping to forge the operational links between dominant elements of that establishment and the Islamic fundamentalist movement in Iran. And the full nature of that relationship is described in extraordinary detail in the two interviews that I did with Fara previously, and they are both on permanent file with Archives on Audio. Go ahead.
Now, in later part of November, I believe that Mr. Yazdi, being an American citizen with all his past close tie with Islamic fundamentalists, being Khomeini's aide and being the first deputy prime minister in the provisional government of Barzargan, which was the first government in Iran, and then later on became the foreign minister all during the hostage crisis till the Barzargan government was forced to resign on November 5th, 1979, and then he still became a very powerful man, became a member of the Iranian parliament, and he is a frequent visitor, particularly during the last days of Mr. George Bush to the United States, and he visited Southern California, and since he came to Southern California, my trouble began to start.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from December of 1992, I was living in a house which I rented from an Iranian citizen, and at the time I didn't know that he had some sort of a close ties with the Islamic fundamentalists in Iran. And we have to also keep one thing in mind, that the Islamic government of Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, has been able to live and exist based on the terror that they have created throughout the world, that even some of the Iranian people that I have known, or some of the past colleagues, they have been frightened to even get on the phone to discuss this matter with me. In fact, some of the Iranians that I have known for many, many years in the opposition movement, or the resistance movement, they literally are frightened to get themselves close, and these are the manipulation of the people by the Islamic Republic of Iran and Mr. Rafsanjani, whom was called by Mr. Reagan as a moderate.
Go ahead.
The harassment started by my landlord from the beginning, late November, shortly after my program was aired, and also one of the cable radio station in Los Angeles I had with one of the old colleague of mine who was living in Germany during the 1960s and 70s, who was hosting a program. I went on the air in Farsi language, and I talked to many of the Iranians in Southern California. The problems started. For instance, the landlord started cutting the heater in my residence.
Who is your landlord, by the way?
He's an Iranian.
Right. Okay. I'm not interested in the person's name, but I think it's worth understanding, because the tentacles of that regime, by virtue of their long-standing working relationship with elements of our national security establishment, are very long. And beyond that, far after a discussion of your immediate circumstances, it might be worth, in addition to some of your new disclosures about the Iranian situation, of course, recent events here in the United States have cast into sharp public focus the threat of Islamic fundamentalist terrorism. I suspect provocation could be stuck in there, but some members of the listening audience may have considered some of the things that we were talking about out of date or arcane or irrelevant, and I suspect that a discussion of U.S. national security connections to the Islamic fundamentalist movement will not appear nearly as remote a subject to the audience. And by the way, for the benefit of people who hear this program on tape, today is March 7th of 1993, some 9 days after party or parties unknown lit up the World Trade Center in New York City. Go ahead, Fara.
Well, evidently the Iranian government sitting in power in Iran, they really did not approve of my exposing them. And obviously the level of their harassment against me increased, and for a variety of security reasons. Of course, I cannot go to much of a detail because I do not want to alert these people that's sitting over there with all the detail of what is happening, because then all the crooks that are working with them in the United States would be looking all over the place to find out excuses and ways and means to discredit me and harass me further. But going back to December, at that time we have had some problems with the landlord, and this shutting off my lights, cutting out the heater, shutting off the hot water, and all these things went on. And this relationship went on till last week on March 1st. By the way, I wanted to also tell you that for my own security, when I moved to the new place, I made sure my address was not given to anybody, and my telephone number was an unlisted telephone number. But the bank that was in contact with the Islamic Republics of Iran and Mr. Yazdi, through illegal means, through the telephone, did obtain my address, and harassment started, and they sent people impersonating a police officer, leaving telephone messages on my answering service. They went as far as impersonating a police officer on the telephone, on record, which I took to police department, complained about it, but nothing was done by the LAPD because they said that they do not have the resources to do anything about investigating the subject matter, because that is not of interest to them, even though that I told them that there has been a bounty on my head by the government of Iran. Subsequent to that, other development took place, and many harassment. Whatever they could, they did to stop me of talking. But I have got a good news for them. I am going to be talking till the last breath that I have. So they're not going to be intimidating me.
And with God willing and the creek don't rise, that'll be quite a while. Go ahead.
And what happened on December 1st, I was told by a friend of mine that who knew the landlord and his family, that the landlord's son goes to his place of business, telling him that he should inform me that within next 1 week I should peacefully get out of that residence, otherwise they are going to do something, and alluded to the fact that he had on him a gun.
He specifically mentioned that he had a gun on him?
In fact, he took the hands of that businessman and put it on his chest, alluding that that is a gun. Now, when I heard that, it was about 8:30 in the evening. At 9:30, I was going home. As I went to my residence, I found out there was a black Mercedes parked in my parking space in the carport, facing outside without a license plate. And the back of it was parked so close to the garage door that I couldn't even see what kind of a license plate he had.
Okay, did you recognize anyone in the Mercedes? Or
No, it was dark and I couldn't recognize whether somebody was sitting in the Mercedes. So I didn't go home at that night. Mm-hmm. What I did, not immediately, I drove by and I came back and I made a phone call to a couple of friends, and the friends, I told them to come because I wanted to have witnesses, because I felt that if I would be with some other people, they would be at least able to witness what was going on. By the time when we got home was about 11:30, which we were watching. We started watching we'd look all over the place. They were gone, and we watched the Nightline, and subsequent to that, by exactly 12:05, they shut off the gas in the premises. Now, the next day, about 2:30 in the afternoon, I didn't have by the way, I haven't had any contact with my landlord or his family at least for about a month and a half. I deliberately have tried to avoid them so there would not be any confrontation or any encounter with them, because I have had some experiences in the past with them which I felt that it's best that I would not get to any discussion with these people at all. So what happens is, when I went down the hill to go to visit a friend, all of a sudden I saw the same Mercedes that was parked in my space the night before was coming up the hill. So by that time when I went down, I called a friend of mine and I said, well, you better get over here. And he did. And at that time, at 20 to 4, we decided that we are going to call the LAPD.
Mm-hmm.
To make sure that if we are going to go over there, we are not going to be confronted with some surprises. The LAPD reluctantly told us that, well, this is not the issue, no crime has happened, and if somebody has parked in your space, that is, well, not good enough for us to send a patrol car over there. And they went through all this discussion, and I told them that this man the night before has threatened my life, and we have a witness for that.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, well, we would send somebody over there. And I also had called the gas company, because when they shut off the gas, I had the fireplace on and I didn't know whether I turn it off or I put it on. So my concern was, if they put the gas on again, the whole place would explode with all my materials, my research papers, and everything that I had in the house.
It's worth mentioning that all of your material, both written and on computer, am I correct?
That's correct.
So when we're talking about blocking your access to your own apartment, we're not only talking about rousting you from your living quarters, but perhaps even more importantly, denying you physical access to your own research, and perhaps allowing others physical access to that same research.
That's correct. Now we're going to get to this. This is how these things develop is very interesting. At that time, we went up to the house with a friend of mine, and we decided that if we see that there is anybody around there, we would stay away from them, not to antagonize them till the police comes. At 4 o'clock, I go towards my residence, and all of a sudden I see that they have put a big chain on the gate that it goes to the hall, some sort of a hall that it goes to the entry of the house, and it's all locked. And all of a sudden I see this hoodlum comes towards me, and he says, on the behalf of the landlord, I am going to lock you out.
Now, when you say a hoodlum, excuse me for interrupting, Fara, when you say a hoodlum, can you be more specific? Can you describe the individual? Why is it that you characterize him as a hoodlum?
Well, because this is a guy that was driving the same Mercedes that supposedly a night before has gone and has made a threat, and is one of these talk the way that he was talking. And by the way, he's an Iranian.
No, was this the same fellow who put the Iranian banker's hands on his chest to indicate that he was carrying a gun?
No, it wasn't the Iranian banker's hand on his chest. It was the grocer that I do shopping over there. He put his hand on his chest that he has got a gun a night before.
Oh, okay. But again, now, just for the benefit of the listening audience, you describe him as a hoodlum because a landlord would ordinarily get someone or perhaps do it himself. Why specifically do you describe this individual as a hoodlum?
Well, the thing is that the landlord, I have known them for the period of 7-8 months that I have known them.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that they were not the kind of people that they would go to hire somebody to send them to deliver a message that if I don't get out of these premises, very nicely, they are going to hurt me at least with a gun or even allude to something like that.
Oh, did he make threats or veiled threats?
Oh, yes, he said that, well, you better tell Fara Mansoor to get out of this residence very peacefully, because if he doesn't, then I'm going to throw him out.
Okay, so in other words, basically this individual delivered a message that you were going to be physically roughed up or physically removed.
That's correct.
In a was not in a legal way.
Right.
Friend, and this message was delivered to you or to a colleague?
To a man who's my neighborhood Iranian grocer that I do shopping over there, and I know him because he's a friend of mine.
Okay.
So at this time, when the guy said that he's locking me out, and I saw the chain and big locks on the gate, I asked him who he is, whether he would identify himself, because at this time I was prepared for him, and I had a tape recorder in my hand, and I took the tape recorder out and just took it right in front of his face. I said, now you introduce yourself. Are you with any law enforcement agency or the marshal office? And he says, I don't have to answer you. I said, aren't you the same man that has gone to the grocer in the neighborhood and made that threat last night? He said, I don't have to answer that either. At this time, we walked away because those guys, they didn't know, at least I thought that they didn't know that the police was coming, so we went and stayed away waiting for the police to come. Police didn't show up, by the way, till about 5:30.
By the way, now, when you say we, who is we, Fara?
I had a friend of mine who's a colleague of mine who's an architect, and we have known each other for quite a number of years. A very trusted friend of mine that I took along with me as a witness, that he at least would be present and see what was going on.
Okay.
Well, at about 5:15, we began to worry because the police didn't show up. So I told my friend to go down the hill and try to make a phone call. Meanwhile, I told him that I am going to go and sit in my car and lock the door and make sure that I'm not going to be harassed or I wouldn't have any contact with this guy. So as soon as he went down the hill, the police patrol car drove up, and I walked out of the car, walked to the police, and I told them exactly what is happening. And I said, well, yes, we got your telephone number, your phone calls, and that's why we are here, and let's see what is going on. One of them came to me, and the next guy went to the landlord, and now there are quite a few of their friends and some muscle guys even are standing by them, because by this time, few additional people that I have never seen before showed up.
And it was your impression that they were basically strong-armed people?
Well, some of them were. They had some female along the way, and I didn't know really what was going on because I've been illegally locked out of my residence. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I see all these people around, and I really didn't know what kind of a show I was witnessing. So I was very surprised what was going on because I didn't really expect to see all this. At this time, one of the police officers went to them, and he came back and asked me whether I have any gun. I said, no, I don't. And he says, could I search you? I said, sure, you can. He said, put your hands up, and I put my hands up. And at this time, he asked me to put my hands in my back, and I did. And at this moment, he put a handcuff on me, right in front of my residence. I asked him, what are the charges? He says, well, one of these ladies have complained that you have battered her. I said, which one? There are 3 ladies over there. I haven't been even closer than 10 feet to any of these people. At that time, the police officer went to them and he came back. He says, well, evidently you have done this, at such and such a time.
So basically now, let me just, for the benefit of the audience, one of the ladies that was standing, and you're saying that there were also some strong-armed fellow, and then the police showed up and they put handcuffs on you, charging you with having beaten one of these women.
That's correct.
And these are the police who did not investigate your previous complaint.
That's correct.
Okay.
And then I said, but what is the evidence? They said, well, we are not able to arrest you on that charges. However, they are putting you under citizen arrest, and under Penal Code 240, we are obligated to take you in.
Mm-hmm.
I said, just on the Penal Code 240, you're going to take me in. So anyway, they took me, soon after that, they took me to the police department, and when we got over there, they checked my record, and they found out that I don't have any record at all. So they said, okay, we have to release you. So they released me. I said, okay, now I would like to go to my residence, which escort me because now my residence are locked out. They said, well, no, we are not in the business of escorting people to their homes. And during the course of the time that I was over there, by the way, and I was in handcuffs, I was very thirsty, and this was the biggest surprise to me because within the last 30 years that I've been in the United States, this is the first time that I had this sort of experience with a law enforcement agency.
And no doubt it was an upsetting and frightening experience.
Of course, it was upsetting and frightening because I didn't know what was going to happen. So at this time, I was very thirsty, and I asked for water.
Mm-hmm.
And when I had a water, and soon, almost about 10 minutes after that I had water, when they were trying to take the handcuffs off of me and let me go, all of a sudden I fainted. And I fell down, and then they said, okay, let's call the ambulance. I said, no, I don't need any ambulance because my experience and reading through a lot of different materials in the past, I was feeling that if something happens, I don't know where they want to take me.
Okay, now what you, just backtracking here for a minute and reiterating, you asked for a glass of water, were
Yes.
given water, and then fainted. Is it your impression that it was in your opinion, was it because of the stress of the situation, or do you think that there might have been something in the water?
I have no idea, but which one of this could have been the cause, but in any event, the result of it was that I fell, and they called the ambulance, and the ambulance came over there. They checked me out, and they said, well, we're going to take you to the hospital, and I reluctantly refused because I did not really trust to be going from police department to the hospital because these things has happened in the past, and all of a sudden you get to the ambulance, you don't know what happened to you, and nobody knows where the hell they're going to take you.
Okay, now just two questions, Fara. Did you experience any unusual physical sensations after being given the water, and also do you have a medical history of something like this happening before?
No, I never had that.
Okay.
Absolutely not. And besides, since that night, my two thumbs, when I was handcuffed, they didn't rough me up, but the whole experience was that I don't have any sensation on any of my two thumbs, but that's beside the point. So anyway, soon after that I was released, but they told me that I cannot go to my residence because if the landlady calls again and charges me with trespassing, now you understand, trespassing to go to my own residence, then they would be compelled to arrest me on her request on the citizen arrest and bring me back again. So I said, okay, I'm going to stay away. Now, at that time, remember, when I left the house at 2:30 in the afternoon, I left everything that I had behind. All I had was a pants and a shirt and my shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else with me. And the next day, I went to the marshal office because the only people that legally could have locked me out were the marshals. And that was not the case. I went to the marshal office, and I went to the police department. The police department said, you have to talk to the marshal office. I went to the marshal office and said, well, we know that this is a very unfortunate situation that you have. Then I found the attorneys for the landlord. The marshal office talked to the attorney of the landlord, and they were told that they have already advised the landlord that they have to let me in. Now, that is actually on the 2nd of March. I stayed away. I went and I talked to an attorney, friend of mine, and he advised me what I have to do. I went again to the police department. The police department told me that the landlord doesn't want you on the premises. I said, of course they don't want me on my premises because I've got all my materials that it would be exposing the government of Iran and many other things, and these people, they would like to keep me away from my material while they have got a key and they have changed the lock on my door so they can go and check all my materials inside the house, and I'm kept outside of the house. Now, what happens is that on March 4th, I go to the marshal's office. The marshal's office told me that they have talked to the attorney of the landlord and they advised me to go over there. Meanwhile, the police department watch commander, after talking to the marshal's office, he wrote a note on his own card and it reads, Mr. Mansoor discussed this case with me and the marshal's office, and any notice to vacate or any order by 3/1/93 is not effective. Signed by the sergeant, which it means that I had a legal possession of my premises at all time and I was illegally locked up my own premises. So after getting approval by the marshal office, I go with a friend of mine. This time we didn't only rely on the tape recorder, we took with us a video camera to the premises to see what is going on, because I didn't trust these people and also the accusations, the false accusations that these people made. By the time when we got to those premises, I saw the landlord and his son standing outside and they prevent me to get on even the carport and said they have called the police, and within 10 minutes, 6 patrol cars came to the residence. And I talked to the sergeant over there. I showed him all my documents and my papers that I am a legal resident over here and I have got a legal position of the premises. At this time, the officer, sergeant with the LAPD, goes to the landlord and he comes back, and in his hand he has got a document that it says that this is a restraining order issued by the Superior Court, that you would not be able to be closer than 100 feet of your own residence. And the story goes on, and I'm still locked out of my premises. I do not have a right to go in. As of actually yesterday afternoon, I talked to the police department, and they said that that order stands, and you have to go to the commissioner who issued this restraining order, and you would not be able to go out there, and if you do, you will be arrested.
At any time, Fara, has any rationalization been, or any rationale, perhaps I should say, been given by your landlord or the related authorities for kicking you out of your apartment?
There is no rationalization in that.
In other words, you were not behind on your rent or anything like that?
Well, you see, these are not really the issue, because I have got a legal position of that premises, and by the order of the marshal and the conversation that the marshal had with the landlord's attorney, the only people that they would be able to lock you out of your premises are the marshal. The landlord specifically has got no right of doing that. The whole idea was to keep me away from my residence and not even allowing me to get closer than 100 feet to my residence. Now, what is important over here? This is not a complaint-a-thon. First, we must expose the ugly truth behind fascism and all these dirty tricks that have been perpetrated by these people via all the stooges in this country, and I'm sure the landlord has been put under a lot of pressure. I knew at one point of time that the landlord had a concern, and it was expressed indirectly to me because of some phone calls that it was made to him, that in the event, if they find out where I am, if I get hurt, he didn't want to have me on those premises. So that it's a very logical conclusion that what is going on.
The landlord had expressed to you explicitly that he did not want to have anything happening to you while you were his tenant.
That's correct.
In other words, I take it from that at some point the landlord had received some sort of communication that something like that might happen.
Yes, and I have to also, I have to tell you this much, that in the course of the first citizen arrest that was made and the subsequent restraining order, on both occasions, the landlord, who hardly even speaks any language, English language properly, has been acting as his own attorney. Now, these manipulation of the due process of the law it is a very, very complex issue, and it would lead one to believe that there are somebody behind, that they are not really putting themselves in the front, coaching him and telling him exactly what to do. Because, for instance, to go to court and get a restraining order the next day that I have been kicked out of my place, this is not something that every landlord would be aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Hardly even attorneys would know about that. That you can go and get a restraining order from the court on some, made-up charges that, you have said or did something to them that it upset them, and based on that they would go and get a restraining order.
Right. Now, I'm not passing judgment on what you're saying. I just want to stress for the audience that I am not an attorney, so the legal fine points of this are outside of my own sphere of expertise. What I find strange, and I'm not casting aspersions on what you're saying, Fara, but I don't know personally how unusual or commonplace something like that might be. But the pressure.
Quite a few of attorneys that I've contacted, to get an attorney is very expensive. It's not very cheap.
Oh no, indeed.
And I talked to some of the so-called quote-unquote progressive attorneys, and they all have fled the scene. And sitting over there alone to hold the bag by myself. Without any exception, it was the opinion of all attorneys, including the Superior Court judge that I talked to today, that whatever has happened based on evidence is absolutely illegal.
Well, certainly, it sounds extraordinary. The thing that struck me, though, beyond that, Fara, was the strong-arm tactics, the threats, the goons, the threat of violent force vis-a-vis a gun, and then the phony charges where you supposedly beat this woman and then you get arrested. It seems, and then the Mercedes, that beyond the highly questionable legal aspects, that's the thing that I personally find both the most interesting and most terrifying. But go ahead.
Yes.
And, of course, assuming that your legal advice is on the money, this would place this whole situation in in a very extraordinary context. In other words, the strong-arm tactics, the goon behavior, would appear to be backed up by legal machinations on the part of the authorities, and would indicate that the goon tactics are being sanctioned from on high.
Yes, there was another thing that I have to... earlier I mentioned that I was dealing with a bank, and what happened with that situation was that the bank, for instance, sent a couple of their people in my premises under pretext that they are representing the bank, and then later on they were impersonating a police officer. And at that time even they accused me of assault, which the city attorney office similarly dismissed. And then we see that recently, the other day, which it was on the 2nd of March, this group of so-called, I would consider them the regime loyalists, concocted these phony charges and had the police arrested me, and subsequent events that is taking place. This is unbelievable. In 30 years that I've been in this country, I've been here since 1964, this is the first time I've experienced this. And when you realize that you have gone public with your story and exposing some very, very crucial evidence, which is based on their own creation, the documents that they have left behind. So obviously, it is to shut me out.
Right now, I would reiterate for the audience that not only have you been basically sentenced to death by the government in Iran, but you had mentioned to me, Fara, and I alluded to it in a previous interview, that in the early 80s you were basically told the same thing by associates of Albert Hakim. Am I remembering correctly?
That's correct. I'm going to get to that tonight.
Okay.
Allow me to say this. What we have to realize is this. First, we must expose the ugly truth behind fascism. Then we must deal with it. And finally, we must put forth a viable agenda.
Okay.
That will be coming. And now, as I have promised a few weeks ago, that I will share a major surprise with you and with your audience, and this major surprise for the first time is being aired.
Okay, now, just by way of punctuating the interview, the travails, basically the frightening odyssey that you've been through, is now up to date. That's where things stand. You are still out of your apartment and blocked from your research?
That's correct.
And so far, the legal authorities' legal means have been unsuccessful in helping you regain access to it.
Yes, that's correct, because I do not really have the means that I could go and get some good attorneys to do this, and the public defenders would not handle a complex situation like this. And to be very honest with you, today when I was talking to a couple of attorneys, and even yesterday, they just didn't want to touch this, because the point of these all incidents that has taken place recently is so mind-boggling to them that one of them doesn't even know what is the best way to deal with this issue. To which court does he have to go to appeal and change the restraining order? For instance, the judge who has signed the restraining order has put in that order that up to 23rd of this month there would be no hearing. And I cannot even go on ex parte. Ex parte means that I have to go over there with a short notice to the other side that I will be in court, and you appear over there, say at 11 o'clock tomorrow, and we're going to go to have a hearing to have a reconsideration for this order, which it means that even the judge or the commissioner who issued and signed that order has refused to allow me to go within 100 feet of my residence, and then keeping that order stand for 23 days before she would hear the case. I mean, this is preposterous.
It sounds awfully strange to me, Fara.
You see, and particularly when the landlord and many of the Iranians, they know that they have heard my story, particularly in the Iranian community, that I would be presenting my case between April 2nd to April 4th at the UCLA CIRA conference, which is Center for Iranian Research and Analysis. And to keep me away from my materials and all the work that I have done, trying to keep me quiet and try to shut me out. So I really don't know how much chance would I have in the future to touch on some of these issues and some of the matters that I promised your audience that I would talk about it in the form of the new surprise. But I think that maybe this is as good as any time to touch on these things, because I don't know when the next opportunity would come, or whether they would come up with some new cocked up stories to try to silence me in any way that they find comfortable and convenient for them.
All righty, go ahead. Now, what is your new disclosure?
Well,
what does it concern?
We have been, if we are to believe that LA Times and Washington Post, that the CIA now is concerned that Iran might be acquiring nuclear weapon. I find this really laughable, since the CIA has, for a fact, provided Iran with a nuclear capability when Gerald Ford was president over 15 years ago, right at the point of transition of power in Iran. Now, what we are going to be talking about is specifically what has happened in Iran since 1974, which in mid-1974, the CIA sent an Iranian-born American citizen who was a nuclear scientist, and his name is Dr. Mojtaba Taherzadeh, and I'm going to spell the first name first. Mojtba, and the last name is Taher, Z like in zebra, Adeh.
Okay.
To Iran to widen Iran's nuclear capability and develop Iran's atomic bomb.
Okay.
While still he was an American citizen, and he was working with the top security at JPL,
which is
Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena.
Right. Go ahead.